patterns, discourse, critique, and so on and so forth. But it's also quite limited. This is actually quite a constrained form of speculation. Yeah, I think that's my bag manager running to the vault. Okay, I'll go back a bit. The art form, the artworks, art collections are quite a constrained form of collection. The really interesting dynamic. Once we've accepted,
just to add that, so the program that Christopher was talking about, Realty, which addresses the interplay between contemporary art and gentrification, is one of the three legs that this web TV conglomerate is standing on. But I just also wanted to point out in practical terms, these bright, shiny green pieces of paper indicate the list of speakers who will be doing these very brief 5-minute rapid-fire contributions, 4-minute contributions, and these are then, you know, this is material for one of those 3 web TV channels which are being inaugurated today, just for clarification's sake. I think that was the basics. The rest you'll figure it out as we go along, I'm sure. Otherwise, we're here to answer questions, and I think we can start. No? Is it rolling?
Well, I'm almost supposed to live my life.
Are you doing the time travel thing yourself? Let me go. Let me just kind of. Okay, you ready, Christopher? It's running. Okay, all right. So it's very nice to be here at KW through this fantastic time traveling device, and it's a special pleasure to be at Kunstwerk, I have to say. Because it was this moment in 2018, March 2018, I realized what a great investment Kunstwerk would be for where I am now and why I can speak to you at all. Which is that essentially this great adventure doing on property speculation is itself a great moment of speculation, and I decided to make my investment then, and I have to say it's paid off very well. Of course, like Kunstwerk,
2 minutes, technical issue.
It's been developing for a long time. It seems it's got nowhere further to go, but I think this particular event's been great for me because I realized that one of the problems with gentrification as it's happened to this point, where you are in 2018, is it's got a bad name. Actually, it's not very cool at all. The way in which essentially Kunstwerk has ethicized not just the political space, but also the capital space through the argument around gentrification means that somebody who's very involved in good moral politics. The curatorial team, I don't think you have to get rid of them. In fact, they're very useful and instructive for being able to make the transformations in a way that's totally viable, legitimate, morally interesting, artistically valuable. And these are the things that can really make for a great investment. You know, as somebody coming from the art field, I realized that this form of the art collection, which I have,
Jetzt haben wir hier ein technisches Problem.
You're talking to people, you've got fantastic ideas, you're involved in the
Irgendwie ist in letzter
transformation
Minute plötzlich
of society
die Live-Funktion doch
patterns, discourse,
ausgetreten. Und ich war gerade dabei loszulegen und bin schon total nervös und voller Adrenalin und will das nur hinter mich bringen. Und wir hatten schon so Ansagen gemacht und alles Mögliche und alle waren ganz gespannt und dann war so.
The art form, the artworks, the collections are quite a constraint of collection. The really
Mann, das tut mir sehr leid. Scheiße. Dafür gibt's Bier. The
really interesting dynamics, the movement.
Nicht ganz so gut, aber immerhin.
I can have to put my money down where Kunstwerk has been, and what you will see in the coming years, and I already know, is where Kunstwerk is moving. So expansion that's about to happen from 2022 to Abu Dhabi, to Guangzhou, and also I think it's about, I'm talking to people who will be, from where you are, will be in charge.
Aber wir haben die doch gezählt, die beiden.
2028, about a new expansion. Portland is an amazing place.
Okay, dann konfiszieren wir die.
Maybe later on, as the series continues, I'll be able to give you a tour around the ring.
It is. And I like some of these things, you know, because
Jetzt behalt die mal, da ist gerade Riesenstress. Also lassen wir die erstmal das
voll.
flicken, denn da gibt es ein technisches Problem.
Are you doing the time travel thing as well?
Es sieht nicht so aus.
There we go. We're just kind of... Okay, you ready, Christopher?
Super.
Guck, was ich mache.
Super,
Also das ist
danke.
einmal das, was wir als Firma machen, das ist schon meine Frau. Und in dem Bautext gibt es auch das Berlin Artist Info, was eigentlich mal so für bildende Künstler als Informationsplattform mit dem BBK zusammen machen sollte. Und das wollten die nicht, und dann habe ich nach einem halben Jahr mehr Newsletter-Abonnenten als der BBK jeweils hatte.
Oh, okay. Schön, danke.
Where I am now and why I can speak to you as well. Which is that essentially this great event you're doing,
Ja, was machen wir da?
property speculation,
Das ist,
is itself a great deal of speculation.
das ist der
And I
Arno.
decided to make my investment then, and I have to say,
Ja,
it's
Das ist
weißt du,
unser
die sollen-
Vorzeigepromi.
of course, like Kunstwerk,
Zusammen mit Niklas.
it's been developing for a long
Die können ja
time.
alle sagen,
It
dass sie
seems it's
Freunde
got
von
nowhere further
irgendjemandem
to
sind,
go,
aber
but
halt nicht noch
I
mehr
think this
von
particular
mir.
event's been
Also es ist
great
egal,
for
aber
me
es ist ja jetzt
because
schon total
I realized that one
Ja.
of the problems with gentrification as it's happened to this point where you are in 2018 is it's got a bad name actually. It's not very good.
Was ist denn?
The way in which
Nicht ausprobieren.
essentially Kunstwerke
Wir haben es nicht ausprobiert.
Die haben es einfach nicht ausprobiert. Ich habe die ganze Zeit jetzt nicht
space,
Viertelstunde vorher, die sollen es
the
ausprobieren.
capital
Das
space
ist einfach ein Foto.
through the argument of gentrification means that somebody who's very involved in good moral politics. The curatorial team, I don't think you have to get rid of them. In fact, they're very useful and instructive for being able to make the transformations in a way that's totally viable, legitimate, morally interesting, artistically valuable. And these are the things that don't really make.
Ja, sie haben es anscheinend,
Yeah, as somebody
sie haben es
coming from
anscheinend
the
gar nicht
art field, I
ausprobiert.
realized that this form of the art
So, ich dachte,
collection,
sie haben es
which I
mehrmals
have,
habe ich
Sag
auch
mal,
gedacht.
die Sendungen, die aber gedreht wurden, werden
talking to
nirgendwo
people
gezeigt
with
schon.
fantastic ideas, you're involved
Die wir
in the
jetzt
transformation
Die
drehen?
schon gedreht
of
wurden, also
society
die schon auf dem
through
Programm sind.
aesthetic patterns.
Die sind jetzt auf dem Kanal.
But
Aber die
it's
werden
also
hier
quite
nirgendwo
limited. This is
gezeigt.
actually quite
Doch, in
constrained.
dem Raum da vorne. Das sollten wir eigentlich auch sagen.
Ja, ne?
Danke, das sage ich noch. Das sage ich noch.
Yeah, I think that's my bag manager running to the boss. Okay, I'll go back a bit. The art form, the artworks,
Weißt du, was am
art
Ende,
collections are
wenn man
quite
die Live-Sendung gemacht hat, guckt ja jeder
of
live zu.
collection, the really
Das
interesting
ist ja am Ende nicht
dynamic.
so schlimm, wenn das nicht
Once we've
funktioniert. Außer, dass es
accepted
halt nicht
speculation
aufzeichnet.
as a form of capital.
Aufzeichnen können wir, aber wir können es nicht streamen. Also es soll eigentlich dann live zu sehen sein. Das ist der ganze...
Okay.
I can have
Weil die Leute würden das aber das live nicht mitkriegen, weil die ja eh hier sind, weißt du?
and what you will see
Ja.
in the coming years, and I already know,
Ja.
is where Kunstwerk will be. So the expansion that's about to happen from 2022 to Abu Dhabi to Guangzhou, and also I think it's about I'm talking to people who will be from where you are will be in charge of Kunstwerk in 2028 about a new expansion. Portland is an amazing place at this point. And maybe later on,
Was?
as the series continues, I'll be able to give you a full tour around the great things that are happening here.
Was ist das Problem genau?
Irgendwas mit dem Livestream.
Aber vorhin hat es doch geklappt, oder nicht?
Ja, YouTube ist es live, aber nicht hier.
Auf YouTube ist es live.
Are you doing the time travel thing as well?
Aber wir schaffen den Übergang nicht zum Kanal.
Okay, you ready?
Ja, weil die live, die haben sozusagen ein Event eingerichtet. Wir schaffen den Übergang mit Live-Events und jetzt
It's
haben wir
very nice to
Zeug
be here
dahinter
at
gemacht.
KW through this fantastic time traveling device. And it's a special pleasure to be at Kunstwerk, I have to
Das
say.
können wir als Plan B
Because it was
anbieten.
this
Ja,
moment
jetzt
in
macht das
2018, March
Geht
2018,
immer noch
I
ganz
realized what a great investment Kunstwerk would be.
Okay, jetzt muss ich ihn einfach
Where I am
schieben,
now
Hände.
and why I can speak to you as well. Which is that essentially this great event you're doing on property speculation
Und dann musst du,
is itself a great deal to speculation, and I decided to make my investment then, and I have to say it's paid off very well. Of course, like Kunstwerk, Meta, it's been developing for a long time. It seems it's got nowhere further to go, but I think this particular event's been great for me because I realized that one of the problems with gentrification as it's happened
Und dann
to
musst
this
du die
point
nächsten
where you are in 2018
in
is
17
it's
Uhr
got a bad
irgendwas
name, actually. It's
setzen.
not very
Sobald wir dann
good.
beginnen, kannst
The way
du dann
in
noch
which
erklären, dass es drüben die 3 Monitore gibt.
Ja.
Wenn der Sender wechselt.
Was?
Wenn der Sender wechselt, muss man dann immer eine neue URL machen.
Es wird kein Senderwechsel. Wir hatten ja alles auf Real TV eingerichtet. Jetzt läuft was? Wir hatten einen Kanal, der war auf Real TV. Wir haben ein Event gegründet. Jetzt zeigt aber leider immer nur das Foto von dem Event und nicht. Aber wir machen das jetzt richtig live, aber dann läuft er halt auf Station Plus. Da ist halt jetzt 2 Stunden dieses Foto auf. Das Problem ist, dass das wollte ich Holger noch sagen, aber er hat halt ein 2-Stunden-Event gebaut.
Aber ich
Weißt du, man kann...
dachte, aber bloß gesagt, der Koch hat digitalisiert sein, weil dort
Wir faken das nicht.
Ja, aber das hätte da gar keine Rolle gespielt.
But it's also quite limited. This is actually quite a constrained form of speculation. I think that's my bag manager.
Ich bin so ein bisschen, ich versuche die Konzentration nicht zu verlieren, so mein Diskurs. Ich habe es zwar aufgeschrieben, aber wenn ich einigermaßen fokussiert bin, dann kriege ich das.
Once we've accepted speculation as a form of capital risk, the really interesting dynamic is the movement between the art collection and the property collection. I can have put it together.
It is together.
Has been, and what you will see
Nice.
in the coming years, and I
Nice.
don't know, that's where so expansion, that's about
Genau.
Ja, die Bibel. Dieses Buch müsst ihr lesen.
And also, I think it's about I'm talking to people who will be in charge of this work in 2028.
Du erzählst auch was, gell?
Portland is an amazing place.
Ja, ne?
Ich verschenke ein Buch, das ist mein neues Sendung. Und das Bücher verschenken.
Finde ich gut. Ah, ich hätte dir auch ein Buch mitbringen sollen. Ich hatte ein Buch, das dich... Ja, nächstes Mal. Ah, ich will es hinter mich bringen.
Alles, was du da sprichst, ist schon live wahrscheinlich.
Ja.
Ich will es hinter mich bringen.
Are you doing the time travel thing as well? Let me go. We're just kind of... Okay, you ready, Christopher? It's running. Okay, all right. So it's very nice to be here at KW through this fantastic time traveling device. And it's a special pleasure to be at Kunstwerk, I have to say, because it was this moment in 2018, March 2018, I realized what a great investment Kunstwerk would be for where I am now and why I can speak to you at all. Which is that essentially this great adventure doing
Ja, es gab keine wirkliche, soll ich sagen, man hat es live nicht so ausprobiert in dem Format, wie es heute auch wirklich stattfindet. Ja, es braucht jetzt so ein bisschen Kleinarbeit. Die Frage ist, wie lange es dauert. Also sie kriegen es schon hin, aber ich hoffe, das wird nicht viel mehr. Also Christopher platzt auch gleich aus allen.
It's got a bad name, actually. It's not very cool at all. The way in which essentially Kunstwerke has emphasized not just the political space, but also capital space through the argument of gentrification. Means that somebody who's very involved.
PowerPoint. Ich habe das immer nur beim PC gehabt. Kann jemand zeigen, wie ich das Bild so hinkriege, wie man es auf meinem Laptop sieht? Aber das war schon besonders fies. Ich war nämlich wirklich so am Start, wollte mein Ding so loswerden und dann so...
You're involved in the transformation of societies through patterns, discourse, and so on and so forth. But it's also quite limited. This is actually quite a constrained form of speculation. I think that's my bag manager running to the...
Du sollst den Leuten sagen, dass es im Studio drüben die 3 Monitore gibt. Ich brauche ein Glas Wasser, so lange dauert es noch, oder? Ja.
Collection, the really interesting dynamic. Once we've accepted speculation as a form of capital risk, the really interesting dynamic is the movement between the art collection and the property collection. I can happily put my money down where Kunstwerke has been, and what you will see in the coming years, and I already know, is where Kunstwerke will be. So the expansion that's about to happen from 2022 to Abu Dhabi, to Guangzhou, and also I think is about, I'm talking to people who will be, from where you are, will be in charge of Kunstwerke in 2028, about a new expansion in Portland. Portland is an amazing place at this point. And maybe later on, as the series continues, I'll be able to give you a little tour around the great things that are happening here.
Klappt's jetzt wieder?
Are you doing the time travel thing or something? There we go. Let me just kind of. Okay, you ready, Christopher? It's running. Okay, all right. So it's very nice to be here at KW through this fantastic time traveling device, and it's a special pleasure to be at Kunstwerke, I have to say, because it was this moment in 2018, March 2018, I realized what a great investment Kunstwerke would be for where I am now and why I can speak to you at all, which is that essentially this great adventure doing property speculation is itself a great part of speculation, and I decided to make my investment then, and I have to say it's paid off very well. Of course, like Kunstwerke, Meta, it's been developing for a long time. It seems it's got nowhere further to go, but I think this particular event's been great for me because I realized that one of the problems with gentrification as it's happened to this point, where you are in 2018, is it's got a bad name. Actually, it's not very cool at all. The way in which, essentially, Kunstwerke has ethicized not just the political space, but also the capital space through the argument around gentrification, means that somebody who's very involved in like good moral politics. The curatorial team, I don't think you have to get rid of them. In fact, they're very useful and instructive for being able to make the transformations in a way that's totally viable, legitimate, morally interesting, artistically valuable. And these are the things that really make for a great investment. You know, as somebody coming from the art field, I realized that this form of the art collection, which I have, it's fantastic because
so where do you put your hands?
Fantastic ideas. You're involved in the
ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in.
Through aesthetic patterns.
Not too long ago, TV was the hot new thing. It was almost irresistible.
Of speculation.
Art museums were among the few who reacted with paranoia and trepidation.
Yeah, I think that's my back match.
They did welcome TV, they did display it, exhibit it, but as you would an embarrassing younger sibling at a dinner party. So the art museums would insist on their sophistication and gravitas in contrast.
The art collection and
now it's 2018 and it's TV's turn to do the gravitas thing. Then again, that depends on how you define TV and its relationship to the web.
The expansion that's about to happen.
Shifts in TV history have been hard to pinpoint in the heat of the moment. There was, in the 70s, for example, the invention of the Portapack, which allowed artists to broadcast cheaply and on the go. And this turned out to be a dramatic watershed moment in TV history. Somewhat more recently, and maybe less dramatically, many of us will have noticed the arrival of shrinks and psychoanalysis on the TV scene. And this, someone said, was like inventing a whole new camera device because it allows for psychological detail without all those annoying off voices from nowhere. And it seems as if web TV has similar potential and possibilities. There's the browser aesthetic, there's the YouTube attention economy, but then there's also the possibility of dividing the labor anew. to revisit the division of labor between production and distribution, between theory and entertainment, between the archival and the speculative, and there might even be a possibility of revisiting television's space-binding possibilities, its ability to create a location within the here and the now. So although we should all tip our hats to the pioneers of the 70s, there's no need for memorialization. There's no need to cutesify, and there will be no retro recording devices or ironic screening room scenographies here. Instead, we should be pushy, loud, proactive, equal partners in conversation, giving to and taking from TV. The 18th of March 2018, which is today, marks the beginning of a whole new TV conglomerate. It consists of 3 web TV channels devised by the artist Christopher Roth, and it is an educational platform. It's an homage to artists who have been broadcasting over the decades, and it is also an artist commission. As such, it doubles as infrastructure as well, in turn. And it does so in order to try and answer bigger questions. For example, what would an art look like beyond contemporary art? One that is less breathless, less exhausted, less cynical than the one we know of today. What kind of structures would that need? Structures of support, structures of visualization, of distribution, production, research. What would they look like? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Web TV.
He also has a show which is only 2 minutes weekly, and it's called Theoretical Images. Pictures. Pictures. And so immediately everybody, they all know the show already. So you can see that on the program also there. And the next one is
Ja?
Also bis da.
Bis hier, ich kann auch zurück.
Nee.
Bitte?
Willst du dich ein bisschen bewegen?
Nein, aber ich bleibe hier stehen,
okay.
ja.
Okay, so here comes Nicholas Mark, and with the title is TV as Utopia.
Okay, thank you everybody. I have to say, when I was a boy, TV was clearly the devil for everybody that surrounded me, and TV was held responsible for the alienation of people, for depolitization, so it was considered a bad thing. And I think I just got used to looking at TV shows when I was 11 years old. And only now, like some years ago, I rediscovered 70s TV, and I saw that apparently it was not an obstacle to politicization, but actually a tool for it. And so that was a real discovery for me to see TV shows from Italy, where they discussed in a very funny and entertaining way topics like emancipation or ecology, as I said, in a very fun way. Or if you look at British TV of the time and the famous TV series by John Berger on the iconography of everyday's life and of the political iconography of the pictures that surround us, that was an interesting and very successful attempt to democratize a very complex Marxist theory of the use of images and imagery. So, and actually I think that only changed when public TV got under pressure by private TV stations, and in a moment when in a neoliberal society the focus shifted from entertainment and information and education to entertainment and consumerism. But of course, it's important to save TV from that because I also think that in a more and more fragmented society, TV could become one of the most powerful and politically important collective rituals. So, what we try to do in that new approach to TV is to rather emphasize the idea of vision in the word television. And that not in an optical or technical way, but to present ideas which are not there. Why that? Because we think when we look at the many very interesting things on YouTube or on other formats of TV now, it's often too much of a depiction of reality, a description of reality. Whereas it could be extremely interesting to create a TV format where you would present ideas, where you would talk about how society could look, how a societal change could be put into place and activated. And so this format basically is an attempt to accelerate knowledge, to distribute knowledge in a different way. And I'm particularly happy to present some ideas about architecture, because architecture, of course, is always about the question how life could look in the future and how it could differ from things we know today. And with that TV format that Christopher Roth created, it will become much more easy for a good idea that was developed, let's say, by a student in Switzerland to be discussed in Bangalore, and a response from Bangalore could be discussed in Buenos Aires. So it's also about connecting different ideas and different approaches to what could be the future of architecture, of society, and so it's about accelerating things. And I want to say a last thing about the technical format and the formal approach to it, I was always very intrigued by Christopher Roth's way to make films and to blur written words and acoustics and images. Because normally either you look at TV and you see things and you hear things, or you read a book, or you read a theoretical text. And I think for the first time he arrived at a format where you read and hear and look at the same time. You hear somebody speaking and at the same time a word appears over his face or behind his ears, which is irritating for 2 seconds and then it's fascinating because it combines the act of reading and the act of watching. I mentioned the series Ways of Seeing from the 70s when John Berger was an important figure in TV, and I think there would be a good moment to come back to that pictorial strategy and create something new by blurring words and images in that way to accelerate also the production of knowledge. That is the hope of that TV show, and I'm hoping it will be a success. Thank you.
Thank you, Niklas. Very nice. The Ways of Seeing, the John Berger thing, is on our channel running now in between the things because we
Show again?
You're showing a map?
No.
No? Okay, please.
My name's Zarina Agnew. I was born and incubated in London, but I live in San Francisco now. I'm here to represent the Embassy Network. So the Embassy Network is a collective of collectives that is a group of intentional communities spread around the world. We have spaces all over the Americas, here in Europe. Our flagship location is in San Francisco. So we were born 5 years ago. And the idea behind the Embassy Network was really to create a diversity of spaces where people could live out their values at home. So the idea behind an intentional community is that most of us inherit our sort of culture from our parents, but if we wanted to design our home and design our next generation and live our values out at home, we have to be intentional about how we do it. So what's interesting about the Embassy Network is that all of our spaces run in a completely different way. So there's no sort of homogeneous structure to how they run. Each of the houses is completely autonomous and self-governing. They have different financial models. Some of them are in the countryside, some of them are in the cities. And the relationships between the houses is also different. So sometimes we have two houses that are very close and they will financially collaborate. Other times we have houses that don't know each other so well. And so our goal is actually to create a kind of ecology of really different kinds of governance and culture. So that we can experiment with how we might like society to look like. And we have a nice range now. So something that's really important to distinguish about the Embassy Network compared to some of the other things you might see out there is to separate it out from the for-profit co-living things that you tend to see. And we operate in sort of synergy with the for-profit world, but we are doing different things. They can never do what we do, and we cannot do what they do. So they can't do what we do because they are for profit and they have salaried people, and so it's quite an expensive way of life. But they're doing really great things in the co-living world. But for us, we're looking specifically at creating self-governing, autonomous communities of people who are able to live out their sort of politics at home. So one of the things that we really try and focus on is creating abundance in various different forms that we can give back to society. There's three main ways in which living collectively brings power back to people so that they can shape the world they live in. One of those is money. So it's very efficient to live in a collective, and so you garner back a little bit of financial means with which you can have some agency in the world. Another is time. So it's very time efficient to live collectively. One person orders food for everyone. It takes about 20 minutes a week to order food for 15 people. It turns up in the kitchen once a week. You never have to go grocery shopping again. And so you garner back some of your time that is taken from so many of us. And then lastly is space. So when you live alone, you tend to not have so much space. But when you live 15 of you together, you just live in these huge buildings and you have a surplus of space. And that's another way in which you can give back. So our spaces have been using this kind of idea of how to sort of give back to society for a while now, and the kinds of things that people do when they are able to sort of act collaboratively is really impressive. So we have free events any given night of the week. We have solidarity funds, which are free pools of money for people who need money. We fund therapy for people who need therapy, all sorts of things like that. I think it's fair to say that many people who live in this way have found it really transformative to be able to start to shape the world rather than be at its mercy. So I guess that just before we finish up, I wanted to say, even though this kind of way of life isn't available to everyone right now, there are ways of getting involved. So there are communes all over the world. The Embassy Network is just one collective, and it sits in a sort of overlapping Venn diagram of many networks. So there's the Fellowship for the International Fellowship for Intentional Communities. Then there's lots of local collectives in your city. You'll probably find them. They tend to be a bit underground, but you'll find them. And you can get involved in these in any way you like. But yeah, that's it.
Okay. Yes, please.
We can't put it together. It is together. We can't put it together. This is written on the backside of this catalog, which is from 71. It's the thickest, the last whole Earth catalog ever issued. Though the original one, the smallest one, came out in 68, so it's a 50 years birthday, let's say. We see on the back side the first image of the whole Earth, shot in 67 by Apollo 8. And welcome to Station Plus. Station.plus is also a website address where you can access all this nice TV freely. Station.plus. We can't put it together, it is together. I will just do a little reading. So let's look on television. TM. Television is on page 345. We can't put it together. It is together. We can't put it together. It is together. So there is 2 books on television in 71 that are advised to wider public. One is The Techniques of Television Production, which is a kind of self-empowerment tool. But I would like to read something that's on top of that. So this is on the techniques of television production, radical software. And I think that this is a very important issue. I will tell you shortly later about why it is so important. I just read a little claim here from Radical Software. Water systems engineers must build city water supply systems to accommodate the drop in water pressure occasioned by the toilet flushing during television commercials. You are laughing. But I think that this kind of radical software will be very interesting to us at Station Plus. For the moment, we are researching and broadcasting on what you see here, the Earth, and on the question, who is owning the Earth? Who is owning all the land? That's the radical question of all city planning and urbanism and architecture in the end. And this last whole Earth catalog has a subtitle, Access to Tools. So I would like to read shortly about the function, as it's named here. The whole Earth catalog functions as an evaluation and access device. With it, the user should know better what is worth getting and learn how to do the getting. An item is listed in the catalog if it is deemed. So we could also call the whole Bobbyverse you're part of here now the next whole Earth catalog. So, useful as a tool, it's 4 points. Useful as a tool, relevant to independent education, which we will provide from ETH+. High quality or low cost, the better I would add both. Easily available by, let's add an email. And I would like to dedicate, so this is my program. I will always gift 1 book, so get rid of things. I will always gift 1 book in each little show. This one I would like to hand over to Sevi and Domi because they are the ones who give access to tools. So, Sevi and Domi, the both are all running all these devices. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Without you, it wouldn't happen.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Okay. I think we go on with Chan and then we go to the Okay, please, John.
Okay. So mobility is as oppression, it was the title you gave, was in a relation, in fact, to, as you said, to the talk I gave in Luxembourg. The idea generally for me was to think about, in fact, how architecture and urbanism, or more specifically the act of architecture, can act as a form of emancipation by its immobility. Generally, we can say that architecture and urbanism are tools and forms of organizing the movement of crowds. And this organization of the movements of crowds can take two, let's say, generic aspects. First, what we can imagine more like everybody will be okay with the fact that architecture puts limits, makes segregations, and so it gives some kinds of immobilities. And historically, architecture has always worked as a symbol of power by its monumentality, by its immobile fixed forms. But at the same time, we know that architecture, and specifically urbanism, organizes the movements of crowds, and it imposes some mobility to the crowds. And maybe the most important example of it is Haussmann's project for Paris, which is some kind of organizations of the movements of crowds and making impossible to block the streets, because with the large avenues you cannot make barricades, and the barricades were forms of immobilization and resistance. And the idea of Haussmann's Paris is to permit, when there's some kind of insurrection, that the armies and police can intervene and just use the big boulevards to get the insurrective people out of the city, or to block them. So in a way, architecture, and maybe more logically today, is a kind of organization and of imposed movement, of imposed mobility. And my purpose is not to say that every mobility is an oppression, it's not the case, but to think of the ways in which architecture can help to have not imposed movements, and also active immobilizations. The example, for example, of active immobilizations, it's what happens in the occupations of places, public spaces, like in Taksim in Istanbul. The act of taking a place and immobilizing the movements is some kind of resistance to the imposed movements of people, but also of commodities, of course. And in this case, the question is how architecture, because its natural way of being is to be fixed, can be part of this immobilization. How architecture, with its walls, with its limits, can be a form of emancipation by its immobilization, and not only with the idea of movement, of action. Because most of the time, when we think of engaged architects, the idea is always tactics, strategies of action, of movement in a way. It's never the idea of a wall or something fixed. It's often against the idea of the form. And for me, the idea is think again the form, not the good harmonious form, but maybe some kind of transgressive forms and physical fixed architecture that can help to go against the imposed movements. And in the sense, which is interesting, is that architecture can be the tool of immobilization of the crowds, and at the same time, crowds can mobilize architecture. And that's what happens in this kind of occupation of places. For example, the facades of architecture become the monumental projection of the crowds. They can project themselves to the crowds. They become the surface of inscription of the crowds, of their revendications. But at the same time, the crowds, they mobilize architecture. They take elements of the ground, of the walls, and they put it in movements. And what I like to think is the way they can work together, how architecture can immobilize and give some monumental symbolic force to the crowds, and at the same time how crowds can mobilize architecture and use it as a tool. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, John. Very good. And the next thing is we try.
It's an amazing place at this point. And maybe later on, as the series continues, I'll be able to give you a little tour around the great things that are happening here.
Well, I'm almost supposed to live my life. Well, I'm almost supposed to live my life.
Are you doing the time travel thing yourself? Yeah. Let me go. Let me just kind of. Okay, you ready, Christopher? It's running. Okay, all right. So it's very nice to be here at KW through this fantastic time traveling device, and it's a special pleasure to be at Kunstwerk, I have to say. A great moment of speculation, and I decided to make my investment then, and I have to say it's paid off really well. Of course, like Kunstwerk, Meta, it's been developing for a long time. It seems it's got nowhere further to go, but I think this particular event's been great for me because I realized that one of the problems with space, but also the capital space through the argument around gentrification means that somebody who's very involved in
please come closer, because the acoustics are very bad from outside. And we'll also talk about stuff. His show is called Space-Time TV with Sam. And now, please, Sandra Bateau.
Okay. So I'll be talking about the biotope map, and I'll be talking about the urban wild in the city, especially Berlin. So if we think about different cities in Europe right after World War II, we discovered that the cities were, in most parts, destroyed, they were bombed. So there were all these derelict areas. They were left there, full of debris, full of rubble. And during the decades, then they sort of developed into some sort of wild gardens. And this has happened that when the bombs fell, they sort of worked like time machines, digging out seeds that were ancient, and they were dug down into the deep soil for centuries, and they came out and started germinating and becoming these strange gardens. And botanists really started to be interested, as well as ecologists or naturalists, because they were able to find in the city plants that they couldn't find in the countryside. So time machines, bombs, time machines. The second aspect is that since then, starting from 1961, 1962, the botanists, the naturalists, couldn't go outside the city. They had to be, if we talk about West Berlin, the city was enclosed by walls, so they had to focus on the city in itself. And that provoked very interesting things. And one of these interesting things is actually the biotope map. And this was a project that was started by the city, so the city of Berlin. So it was produced practically by the Senate. It was published by the Senate because it wasn't just a study of the green areas, of the open areas. It was supposed to be a tool to rethink the city of West Berlin. And this is the map. As you can see, enclosed by the wall, everything that is outside is white, does not exist. So everything that is inside is what's interesting and what is the focus of attention. So I just put it down, just for you. So there was particularly the commission from the city to the botanists, to the ecologists, to draft a new plan of the city that would encompass not only the green areas, but also the built areas. So everything was conceived and thought and understood as a biotope, which means also infrastructures and buildings, which means your own apartment and your own house. So everything was a natural biotope. And this was an important step to rethink the city as a place that is not in antagonism to nature, not in antagonism to the countryside. Something I think that is very valuable today as well. So they mapped infrastructures and they named very interesting biotopes, like the Autobahn biotope and the bridges biotope and the street biotopes. And this was a moment that provoked quite a bit of change, and also within the city. And some of the products or the fruits of this map was an example that, based on a certain political climate, of course, in the late 70s, they started slowing down the plan of maintenance for the Tiergarten, because with the intention to turn into a rainforest, which is kind of radical. Then there were other areas that were wild and grown wild since the war that were turned into parks. As an example, near Anhalter Bahnhof, if you take a walk there. They're really beautiful parks, and they didn't do anything. They just declared them as parks, and there is very, very little maintenance involved in these areas. And if we think of the city as right now as a network of microbiotopes, of micro landscapes, of rare plants, rare insects and animals also, because everything is together, actually. Then we can sort of look at the city with different eyes. and discover all these places, because these places are ruled by indifference and neglect and forgetting, which is a good thing, actually. What I want to address also is a plan of maintenance that is currently enacted by the city, and it is about following a certain kind of ideology of reconstruction. So therefore, all these areas don't fit into the picture. They need to be straightened out. They need to be cleaned out. They need to be erased. And what I propose is a plan of forgetting, of indifference, of neglect for the city that complements the densification of the city, because this is what we are experiencing at this point. In order to have all these gardens of strange plants, of gene pools for the future. These gardens are rich. They contain a different kind of density that we absolutely need and we are dependent upon. Not only that, not only a plan of forgetting and indifference, I also propose a plan for the destruction of the city, taking out things out of this city to leave more space and possibilities. And this is the end.
Yeah. Okay, the next one is, as I told you, Siddhartha is making a book show, and he has a very great bookstore now in Berlin called Hopscotch in Kurfürstenstraße. Okay, please, Siddhartha.
Hello. I had a different kind of presentation prepared for how to talk about the connectedness of books. And I think in the end, we will realize that everything is connected, as I'm sure you're slowly realizing. And books just make it possible for you to realize that things are connected. Ideas, passions, actions. We're going to talk about a book that came out of a seminar that held in Schengen in Luxembourg. And as many of you know, Schengen is the name for the infamous treaty that allows this mobility of people throughout Europe. Something that I realized just about an hour ago. And if you connect this visa-free treaty pact that allows people mobility to a certain number of countries in Europe to the problem that mobility has presented Europe with, people are allowed to come in, but again, only among restricted pools. It can only the dark pools of humanity that Europe restricts, controls, and allows to enter, or sometimes not enter, but lie in a state of stasis. And that was an interesting question, because where do we put these people? And it so happens I've seen a couple of these examples of housing for refugees. One of them is not too far from where I live in Kreuzberg, in fact, not too far from the Berlinisch Gallery, where these white pods have appeared, which house about 262 families, which the Berlin public was given a tour because the city thought that the citizens of Berlin should have a look at where these people were housed. And then I went into a housing camp in south central Greece. It's about 3.5 hours from Athens on the Mani Peninsula, on the edge of the Mani Peninsula, in the southern part, where 370 odd refugees have been trapped in a village for the last 3.5 years. They're not allowed out, they're not allowed in, there are no jobs, they live on 90 euros a month per person. And they're also housed in the local communities. And so the question of housing, where do we house these people? And 150 years ago, give or take, Karl Marx and Engels were collaborating, and Friedrich Engels, and they were working on what became known as the Communist Manifesto and then Capital Volume 1. But Engels, who was more interested in certain other things, wrote something called On the Housing Question, which we see the German version of now. This is a cheap print-on-demand copy which you can buy for maybe 3 or 4 euros. You order it from your favorite rainforest website, and they ship it to you. And the basic thesis of Engels is that to solve the housing question, which is you cannot do it through policy reforms. You've got to attack the social question at the heart of a shortage of housing. This is 150 years ago, mind you. We are talking about the same questions now in Europe, in the great cities of the world, London, Paris, Berlin, New York, even Los Angeles, which has now the highest number of homeless people per capita in the Western world. Something like 80,000 people live on the streets in Los Angeles right now. So Engels' idea was that you cannot solve these questions, housing, through policy, much as the city of Berlin is now trying to solve, something that we are all familiar with. We think about this, so I use Berlin as an example. But even London, there's a huge crisis among this, partly because of the two things. One, because of free mobility of capital and lots of free capital coming from outside England, buying up houses that lie empty. Just last week, we found out that 11% of new housing built in London since 2011 has not even been, they have not taken keys of occupancy. People have bought houses, have not taken keys. They just move money out from some other territorial state, and then they buy a house and they don't take occupancy. The other problem for housing in London is something called the bedroom tax, which is a 15% tax assessed on property ownership. And it's too complicated to go into this, but it's worth looking up. There has been quite a bit of coverage on this, because London's housing population is also growing from something like 20,000 about 20 years ago to almost 65,000 homeless on the streets every single night. I mean, it's in certain parts of London, especially the hip parts and the east part, it's a calamity. I mean, if you go to the subway station, which closes at 10 past midnight, there are literally dozens of people sleeping on the streets, on the steps, one person, or on the streets, just outside the station because they're heated. And the UN Housing Commission wrote a report on it, which came out earlier last year. And the Housing Minister of England, who's Chris Hopkins, I believe her name is, called it a Marxist diatribe. And because all the report said was, if you take off these taxes, if you use the taxes instead of spending it on other things, if you spend it on building housing shelters, you can actually maybe do something with that problem, but which takes us back to the housing question of Engels. So we've done one book. The second book is a report of a conversation at the University of Luxembourg School of Architecture, conducted by Florian Hertweg, from whom you'll hear later on today. And he talks about the connection of architecture, aesthetics, and politics, which are three very sexy words. For a bookseller, there is nothing more sexy than aesthetics and politics right now. I mean, the number of people who ask me for clarity on this matter on a daily basis, if I got €1 from them, I would open a much bigger bookshop in 2 years. But one of the reasons I love this book, and I really am very interested in reading more, I've read a couple of conversations, is it's belief that architecture is not capable of solving the housing problem. It's belief that architecture cannot do much. And there are reasons why different people have opinions about that. From Anna Brandl-Huber, who we just heard before, who says that architecture cannot solve the problem because architects do not think enough about the land they build the structures on. For example, a very good example of this, and I really think about this a lot, is Zaha Hadid, whose buildings are championed for the beautiful design, for the way they build, how they build. But Zaha Hadid cares nothing about the people who build them. A very good example, in Qatar, where a person dies weekly from heat conditions, building one of our stadiums for the World Cup, which is happening in 4 years. Should the architects not think about this? So then there are other positions where they make an argument that architecture, politics, and economy should be more in conversation, because as the alt-right has made clear, questions of politics are becoming more important than economics. We have lived in an economic moment since World War II, give or take, 15, 20 years, where unprecedented growth saw a certain kind of lack of engagement with politics. And alt-right, with their newfound anger or long festering anger about questions of distribution of equality, but from a different perspective than, say, someone like me thinks about, is bringing politics back into the equation. So architecture, politics, housing, all connected through books, through a thesis, maybe a counter thesis. I'm not sure, because Florian has very carefully left this book open to interpretations. He has an idea, he leaves many things open for you, and a resolution of some kind which might appear in a third book, which I have ideas on what a third book can be, but I would also invite you to go find the third book, because that's where the dialectic resolves itself in books. Thank you.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Hallo, hallo, hörst du mich?
Okay, ready? And please, John, if you lead.
Herzlich willkommen zu der wöchentlichen Show Menschen mit Hund. Ist die Show wöchentlich? Ja? Wir machen das hier auf Deutsch, weil wir festgestellt haben, dass Hundebesitzer dazu tendieren, mit ihren Hunden in ihrer Muttersprache zu reden. Und es wäre ein bisschen blöd, über Hunde zu sprechen in einer Sprache, die sie nicht verstehen. Du bist Jan Tremsal?
Ich bin Jan Tremsal, das ist Toni.
Wie alt ist Toni und wann bist du ihr zum ersten Mal begegnet?
Toni ist jetzt 2 Jahre und ein paar Monate. Ich bin ihr begegnet zum ersten Mal vor 2 Jahren in den Vogesen. Da kommt sie her, sie ist nämlich Französin und ich auch. Eigentlich müssten wir Französisch sprechen.
Macht ihr aber nicht?
Nee, machen wir nicht.
Nee?
Nee. Okay. Wir haben am Anfang haben wir versucht, ihr die Befehle auf Französisch beizubringen und das hat sie auch. Also am Anfang konnte sie nur assis und sowas, aber inzwischen sind wir jetzt bei Deutsch gelandet. Sie ist zweisprachig und beherrscht beide Sprachen sehr gut.
Und hat Toni eine Neurose, die du mit ihr teilst oder die ihr mit ihr teilt? Habt ihr irgendeine gemeinsame schlechte Eigenschaft, die du hier bereit wärst zu nennen?
Nee. Also sie ist stockfixiert. Ich habe viele andere Neurosen, aber keine, die wir teilen, glaube ich, nein.
Und ist sie ein Troublemaker oder gerechtigkeitsstiftend? Macht die Stress oder hat sie ein Interesse daran, dass alles gut läuft?
Ich glaube, sie hatte Interesse daran, dass alles gut läuft. Sie liebt Harmonie und das merkt man, wenn wir uns streiten oder so. Ist sie sofort kommt sie und versucht, dass irgendwie alles wieder gut ist und will Liebe.
Und ist ihr jetzt gerade langweilig oder hat sie Spaß?
Ich glaube, sie hat Spaß.
Geht sie gerne auf Partys?
Sie ist endlich mal ein bisschen ruhig und sie hat irgendwie Platz und sie genießt es. Ich glaube, sie mag die Farbe Grün auch.
Ja? Also hat sie ein ästhetisches Empfinden, würdest du sagen? Kann sie...
Ja, aber ich habe es noch nicht ganz raus, wie sie tickt und was ihr Geschmack ist. Ich bin noch dabei, das zu erforschen.
Glaubst du, ein Hund wird dümmer oder schlauer dadurch, dass er in der Stadt lebt?
Schlauer, glaube ich.
Ja?
Ja, tatsächlich. Also es ist ja, weil es dann plötzlich nicht nur um Instinkte geht, sondern einfach irgendwie so gewisse Regeln. Oder?
Ja, ich glaube auch, also dass ein Hund zumindest genauso gut hier evolutionieren kann oder Hunde, also in Kunstwerken in so einem Zusammenhang wie in irgendeinem Wald, oder? Vielleicht sogar noch
Absolut.
irgendwie...
Also vielleicht verlernen sie dadurch natürlich auch andere Sachen und verdummen auf eine andere Art und Weise. Dass sie zum Beispiel nicht wissen, wie sie irgendwie, wenn sie Hunger haben, jetzt einen Hasen erlegen oder sowas.
Glaubst du, dein Hund würde einen Menschen für dich umbringen, wenn es sein müsste?
Definitiv nicht. Sie ist sogar ein sehr schlechter Wachhund. Ich dachte immer, sie wäre ein ganz guter Wachhund und war gespannt darauf, wann es das erste Mal passiert, dass wir zum Beispiel einem Einbrecher oder so begegnen oder nicht begegnen, aber jemand bei uns einbricht. Und das ist tatsächlich passiert jetzt vor 2, 3 Wochen. Und Toni war ganz im Gegenteil. Sie hat weder gebellt noch irgendeinen Mucks gemacht, sondern ist irgendwie immer wieder zurück in ihr Bettchen und wollte ja nichts damit zu tun haben. Hat so getan, als würde sie nichts mitkriegen. Und ich musste irgendwie alleine dem Einbrecher begegnen und ihn in die Flucht jagen. Auf Toni war leider kein Verlass.
Und wo war dein Mann zu dem Zeitpunkt?
Der war bei Toni. Ja.
Was glaubst du, ist Tonis größte Angst? Wovor hat die am meisten Angst?
Wovor hat sie am meisten Angst? Vor dem Wäscheständer.
Ja.
Und so Hemden auf Kleiderbügel, wenn sich die bewegen oder so. Also Kleider überhaupt auf Kleiderbügel. Das mag sie gar nicht.
Bobby sagte gerade was von Kartons. Sie hat ein Problem mit Pappkartons.
Wenn sie im Auto auf ihrem Sitz sind, ja, und Geräusche machen oder umfallen. Also das kann sie nicht ab.
Okay,
ja?
Vielen Dank.
Hat sie gut gemacht. Du musst einfach nur nach hinten weitermachen, ne? Das fetzt.
Okay, and then the next one is... Maybe to say, Patricia is part of the xeno-feminists, are you? Kind of?
Yeah.
And
No,
are you
Laboria
part of the
Cubonics.
accelerationist?
I don't like this label, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
She's not, but she's in this kind of...
Involved in this discourse, but
in this discourse.
This is maybe something to say.
Having on Tuesday a talk with Helen Hester
Yes,
in the How.
at the How, yeah.
And you should
Yeah.
Are we running? Okay, we're running.
Well, maybe that's one thing to just say, like immediately after the introduction, is to just put forth the sort of problematic that in this kind of wealth of information that we're in, there seems to often be a sort of tendency, especially in theory and the arts, to caricaturize disciplines. So that's maybe one reason why I would have avoided that label. The other thing that was interesting just in seeing these wide array of presentations was to kind of, it ties into some of my own personal interests in complexity, our complex society, and how new models of subjectivity and feminism need to adapt for that condition. So I'm even thinking about seeing the dog that evokes kind of Haraway, and then other statements make me think about, say, the philosopher Wilfrid Sellers' project, which was about how things hang together, right? And this is before complexity science is even a named science. So, yeah, sorry, I'm a bit nervous in front of the cameras. But basically, I kind of picked this word, cold world, because it's been used by this CalArts research group to describe exactly that world of hypercomplexity, big data, and the type of alienation that we experience in the face of this world. And the thing about it that is interesting for me is that it not only indexes that scale of complexity, but also our kind of existential human crisis within it. So, and this is what I think is leading a lot of people to start talking about or emphasizing theoretically questions of the human. What is humanism again? So what I mean by this existential crisis is that it's a world that humans, at least some of them, have built, right? But it's a world that escapes our ability to grasp it. To me, this means that we also need different models of subjectivity that aren't privileging immediate experience only, but that are also able to sort of mitigate these multi-scalar crises, right? These crises that happen on a local scale, but also on a planetary scale, without having to sort of reduce the problems, let's say. So I guess that would be my interest, or how I would sort of just map out in general this problem, and also to make sure that it's also to kind of emphasize that, you know, another statement by Haraway, which is to kind of assert for a better account of reality. So these assertions are also kind of epistemic imperatives as well, attached to a feminism. So I think I will leave it at that, and yeah.
Okay. Donna Haraway also did a television show, which we also have in the curated.
Thanks for Christoph. Thanks for the invitation. And finally, I could do something in art space that I think these kind of things are a little bit challenging on the basic rule of actually an art institution. That to play a flamer, to bring a flavor into it. And I think most of my work in the last 2 or 3 years is about that. And I like what Christoph did with this kind of very comprehensive way of working by bringing the theories and real action into an art institution. And I don't know what is, like Tilda said, about beyond art, beyond contemporary art. I just think, yeah, it has to be more immersive. It has to be that people could share, but in a way, it's not, I would say it's not like sharing kind of situation, but something that you could actually get a bite of the reality. So that what I think is very important, because it's something not only on this so-called knowledge level of thinking or practice level of your mind, but something more into everyday life. So when I start to work with Christoph on this project, it's really something that I wish I could bring something to everybody that I'm interested in nowadays, kind of fast food or this kind of no time situation. And I wish you can do it better. So in a way, I was very fascinated by somebody did this kind of live cooking show with microwave. But personally, I hate microwave. So I think, yeah, there's many other ways actually using blending old technique, old method, but with more kind of building a standard of actually you could have something nice with your everyday life. So with the one-pot idea, is like I try to use all this cheap material, but not today, because Christoph gave it to me a very good chicken, and it's a biologically nicely treated organic chicken, which is like, yeah, far beyond what I expected. And yeah, and also I bring a lot of nice stuff. I have to say, the tofu is very kind to us, and probably he would not feel hurted so much and to share the flavor with you guys. And the chicken, I have to cut him or her into pieces, so it's better to cook. And then I have the rice half from Himalaya, half from Japan. And I wish, yeah, we could all share that. Is that long enough? I think we should cook something, no? Hello, Christoph. Where are you?
Sorry?
Yeah.
You done?
I need
okay.
Not yet.
And we will come back.
Not. Okay, not even start. Well, I need some water.
Oh, you need some water?
Ah, okay, thank you.
Ah, there's water.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
I thought you were done.
Almost, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and I think one important thing is for people who have no idea about cooking is not a problem. And I'm very much into this kind of laziness of actually letting things sitting there for a while and then you can really take a spoon. So I think this is important of how I share. It's not about like being a professional. It's really about, you know, being easy but enjoy your life in a more nicer way. But it's all about preparation. I mean, how you mix things together and how you put them together, and then it's all about timing. So it's like they adding up to each other and with the material itself. So they change in different time and different heat, different condition. But yeah, so I would say it takes about 20 to 25 minutes. Then I'm sure I can give you something to eat. Yeah.
Okay. So we have another break and we move to S plus, to station plus, and Sam will show us some stuff. And
two kinds of rice. I mean, from India.
Please, Sam.
Okay, welcome to Space Time with Sam. It's not about space, it's about stuff, but the name is really good. And Bobby made me do it about stuff and not space, but that's fine. Indeed, so I guess this is like episode number 7. Not that it really matters, but somehow been thinking about things for a while, about what is important. Stuff is becoming more important in my life all the time. You know, just like a quick digression, like this week I had to do the weirdest thing ever. So my parents are both gone, and I had to stand in my apartment with my sisters, and we are 4 in total, and say like, I want that, and I want that. Among other things, I got this sweater. I actually got a lot. It was totally a good deal, because I really care about stuff more than most of the 3 of them. So I want to talk today, again, it's like in 3s, but they're sets. It happens that each of these sets begins with a stolen item. Somehow I kind of imbue value on things by nicking them, not in like a harsh way, just in a simple way. So like, you know, this is like I stole off the wall in the bathroom that my dad made, so it's not like super big crime. And I wanted to talk today, this is from '66. I've had it for 10 years, I think. And it's a peace dove, you know, which is charming in its own right. It itself, of course, is nicked from Matisse, right? I mean, so the old man, great though he may have been, stole tremendously. So, and then I thought today we'd do a theme about sets, and I found this other thing, which I really like, which I thought he might be here today, which is Jean-Pascal Flavien made this peace dove, which I just like randomly got in an email, in a post from Esther Schipper, who was here a few minutes ago, but is apparently gone. And this claims that this thing is a nucleus for a house. So I'm kind of proposing the thesis today that like stuff begets other stuff that starts to have other meanings, and that things are all in a kind of train if you start to take it in and care about it. So that's just example number 1. Example number 2 is stolen from here, from this very building. It was a party downstairs, which is, you know, kind of pretentious, and I don't want to, you know, tout Marina Abramovich, but she did have this little silent party wherein you had to, you know, sit there, you know, twice as many people as us with this thing, and I thought, you know, memorabilia, I'm going to take it, which wasn't that hard to do. So, but it's this building, and we're here in KW, and I thought that was good. And then that started a whole kind of general Marina Abramovich-related stealing story, wherein I went to another Marina thing. I don't really like Marina Abramovich, just for the record, but that's irrelevant. I got these other really cool construction headphones, and then they were part of a series by a guy who then subsequently became my friend, Igor Levitt. And so I keep this stuff in my house all together because Igor was playing. Look at the camera, sorry. Igor was playing, so now this kind of stuff, this train of stuff is leading towards other things. So I now have made a piano bench for Igor, and somehow it's part of let's say a progression of stuff. And then another progression of stuff is this thing, also stolen from my parents, which would have been a big fight this past week had I not taken it 10 years ago. And I would have had to give up some other fine platter, which I got to keep. But this platter was taken, you know, from my parents, and it's really nice. And Arno Brandelhuber, who you've heard from earlier, who's one of our colleagues, admired this. But we lived together at the time, so it wasn't a jealousy, admiration, it was just what a lovely thing, let's serve the signature salad on this. But then Arno, because stuff begets stuff, bought me this. And it's almost like you want to just tear up, right? That he got like a little one. And it was 2 days after I broke another yellow pan. So, thank you, Arno, who's here. You know, and then you realize that, then I started to realize that, like, you know, Arno understands stuff, and then it's about enamel, and then it's about things coming together, and so I have this other bowl that I got recently, which is part of this set, and so enamel becomes something I care about, not because I give a shit about enamel per se as a material, although I apparently do. It's because it grows, so it has its own little life. So it's like a little series of stories, like little bits of thin metal coated with color. And of course, the older, the better. Arno's is the best finish, for the record. You know, and finishes matter. And so it starts to bleed. And now when I see enamel, I'm like, oh, I gotta have that. And it's become, so it's all kind of growing. And when I see Igor music stuff, I want that. And suddenly I want a piano, even if I can't play a note, because of this Marina thing. And I certainly want, I mean, I do have 1,000 collages of the old man, so I'm covered there. Anyway, that's just a quick theory about grow your stuff.
So, thanks a lot, Stan.
Pleasure.
That was great. Thanks. Okay, the next one.
So this, okay, so this, it has been said, is originally a debate I've organized in Schengen with my chair of architecture at the University of Luxembourg. And actually we were, and we still are, sick of architecture as a pure act of designing objects. Stefan Trüby, who is also part of the book, he said that it's now, it's the end of architecture. It's probably, hopefully, the end of phenomenology. So we stated that phenomenology is, doesn't care about the social and the political dimension of architecture. While actually we are confronted with the excesses of capitalism. It's not only the land property issue, but it's also, of course, you know it, the transformation of urban territories into archipelagos of socially homogeneous islands. So in this respect, emancipation does not mean, of course, emancipation of architecture from society, which would be the concept of autonomous architecture, nor emancipation of society from architecture. This would be the radical activism of '68, but more emancipation of architecture and urbanism from the excesses of capitalism. So we invited a dozen of architects who are for us, I would say, amongst the protagonists of this architecture engagée, how you say in French, of architecture that claims, again, a social and political ambition. So I don't want to say more on this book. Buy it. It's like, it's very cheap, 25 euros for a book of architecture, or as Lars Müller always says, 2 pizzas. So as Christopher said, from Schengen to Venice, so now I go to Venice, and oh no, maybe I take this book again because there's one quote of Arno. He says, during the debate, how do we work in a condition in which the question of land ownership is the starting point for several of our preferences of social housing and so on. The and so on is pretty, I mean, it's a lot, of course. And this was already an issue in the book we made in 2015. And the 7th chapter of this book was already about a dialogue that we should establish between Boden, land, and Eigentum, property. The land as a common good and not a pure object of that the economy is trading with, and a dialogue with the property of basically buildings. So it's funny because Sam, you were talking almost, I mean, your property drama is it's quite interesting too. When we got the commission with my chair of architecture of curating the pavilion for the next Biennale in Venice, we took this as an opportunity to work on this land property issue. And Luxembourg is a very interesting field because I always say that it's a kind of avant-garde of the over-privatization and the over-speculation on land. I just give you one statistics. It's of the constructible, potentially constructible land in Luxembourg, land in the country. 8% only of the land still remains in public hands, 8%. So what does it mean for sustainable urban development? I mean, we are here in Berlin, and we know that after the fall of the wall, 50% of the constructible land was public, and then after, especially after the Landowski scandal in 2002, and the bank crisis, which was in Berlin much before, they sold most of this land. So this is, of course, a theme of the Luxembourg Pavilion. But at the same time, we ask ourselves, how can we react as architects? I mean, either we can say we become politicians. Of course, activism is also extremely important. But we are, of course, planners and designers. So our question for the pavilion was, the challenge is how can we react as an architect to this problematic development. So we revisited the history of architecture and we analyzed projects that react to this property drama, to use this word. And we defined 5 typologies, actually. The first one is, and of course I have to say that the status of the land could be either public or private. What does it mean if we act as an architect on a privatized territory? So we can say, so we developed these 5 typologies. The first one is when the architect reduces the footprint of the building. The example, of course, the most prominent example is the Seacroom building in New York. The second, and of course to offer this beautiful plaza to the city. The second one is we are here in Berlin, so there is of course the Vienna superblocks would be one example. It's when you have a block structure and the courtyard is open for public uses. So we are here in Berlin, we have for example a very important Veneta-Platz project of Josef Paul Kleihues. By the way, it's social housing. The third one is integrating public surfaces into the building, which is of course the Jussieu project of Colas and so on, the bigness that he theorized in bigness. The fourth is the artificial, when the architect offers a sort of artificial surface, public surface, which is independent of the level of the street. In France, we say urbanisme de dalle, which was very prominent basically in the 50s, and basically all the production of the Team 10 of the 50s and surrounding architects in the 70s. And then the last one, which is the most radical one, is of course when architects detached the building from the ground. This is of course Le Corbusier originally, with the building on the pilotis, and the ground is, how he said, it's liberated from the ground, libération du sol. So the ground is of course symbolically and physically detached from the building, and the ground is of course of common God. So I don't want to say more. Come to, you're all invited of course to see the pavilion in Venice. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And it's Lee who does the final preparation on his dish, and then there is an issue with the health police that only the team is allowed to eat it. So whoever feels who's not the audience and the team can eat it. But we are not allowed to poison the audience.
Which would imply that we're all the team.
I mean, he only cooked for 10 people, or 15?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know, it
So
depends.
We get it, but who's extra hungry feel as team. Exactly. Okay. Please.
Yeah. So, well, the idea is I try to cook for everybody, but we have a lot of limitations. So in a way, I wish I can bring something to you guys and you have a little taste. And I'm sure the chicken rice would take even longer because I think I'm a little bit too greedy to make much for people. The tofu is on site, so I wish you could try tofu earlier because it's taking just a little bit shorter time. And yeah, something is burning from the plate. And that's always, things have to be, yeah, it's okay, yeah. Because even fire comes, is normal, but yeah, so it's cooking, it's okay.
So we have to wait?
Yeah, I think we have to wait a little bit more,
okay.
Because it's not like I expected. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, you realize that the whole thing dissolves now into the going over for teams, or whoever wants to stay, wait. How long do we wait?
I think for the tofu, it's another 10 minutes should be okay.
10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, so should we come back in 10 minutes? I mean, come back on television and show something else? Yeah, loop something. Yeah, okay, we do that.
Yeah?
Okay, and maybe Tierdat fills the gap.
Yeah.
With resume.
More smoke. Yeah.
So we have to eat from here. And we are all in the picture.
That's certainly interesting. I mean, it's a metaphor.
Let's move out because Lee is talking to the world again.
Yeah, so it's very strange. I mean, things happen when you make it live. As a professional chef, it's not really acceptable. But as a curator, it's okay.
It succeeds as an art project, not as a dish.
As an artist,
actually, we should allow things fail, you know. And well, I think it's half and half. So half fail, half okay. And
that's what the curator and the chef want. It's half.
This is the art system. This is the organic society. You know.
Can we try some?
You can try actually, but yeah.
Oh, it is burnt, eh?
And the chicken rice certainly shows our system nowadays that something overcooked, something not cooked. And I think that's interesting because I try to blend this energy from Himalaya and also from Japan, which my Indian friend found out is actually from California, where they made the Japanese rice. And it is very much related to how I work, and I think that's a great response to your project.
But also, what is when you mix the rice, that one would cook faster than the other one?
You mix the rice?
I mix the rice, but I think the plate underneath is not treating me well because somehow the pot is like 2/3 is overheated and 1/3 is not.
We should have used our things.
That's
the Cavie thing. That's bad.
That's exactly the art system. It's not about that. It's just about like every time if you try new stove, new pot, new stuff, you better be careful, and that's a good thing to learn.
But there's nothing in there what is eatable. I mean, I can't eat it anyway because
you can try, but it just
you tried it.
It's burned. Yeah, because. I would, yeah.
That is very good. Very, very good. So what was in that again?
Tofu, just tofu and this kind of bean paste, and some water and coriander. That's it. The bean paste, that's it. Yeah. And I think this is something like the bean paste is like fermented, so it's always nice to have a fermented food in winter. And I try to do something in winter, and the ginger is essential. So a lot of ginger in it, to give you a little kind of activation.
It's really nice.
Yeah.
Well, where do you get the bean paste?
From China, but you can get in any Asian shop.
Are there bones in there?
There are some bones,
So Tony can't eat it.
This piece you can take it out.
It's dangerous for it because they get if you eat them, they get sharp.
Yeah. No, there's only one piece.
That's the only thing. I mean, she eats everything. She would eat it, but then it's dangerous. We're still live, so it's fine. Come here, come in the back, and it's the first time I saw that one dish of Lee doesn't work, but it's also the circumstances.
I still want to try it.
But it's burned because somehow you see this part is not cooking, some part is overcooked.
But maybe you mix it with this sauce now.
No. I just don't do that. Well, actually you can, but I try to make more tofu.
It's good, isn't it? And it's gone. Good and gone.
More coming.
Oh, it's more coming.
Yeah. Well.
You just put it in there.
Yeah. That's also called one pot. It also can be a lazy cooking process.
So that's the show Lee does. It's called One Pot.
Yeah.
And this pot is from Nagaland, which is above Bangladesh in India. And this pot is from the internet.
Yes.
And where is this from? The internet? Also from Bangladesh?
From Amazon.
No. I've never been to Nagaland. Nagaland is a matriarchate, a communist matriarchate within India. And I was so convinced that one day I have to go there, so I bought every towel, every blanket, every cup, everything I could get from Nagaland.
Okay.
And they were eating humans until 1910 or something, and then turned into a matriarchate. I can't say what that means.
That's interesting.
Naga.
Yeah.
And he likes the pot, right?
I like both very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one you can see.
Yes.
And you can see the process. It's very beautiful. Yeah.
What?
You're saying matriarchs are cannibals.
First cannibals, then matriarchs. Yeah, I mean, no, I'm not the curator, I'm just saying it.
Open for discussion.
Where are you from? China, from Peking. You?
I'm from Croatia.
Croatia?
Yes.
Oh. I've never been there.
You should go.
Okay, I go now.
Okay, I'll do the cooking. You go. Give me the mic.
But you lived in Austria, right?
So I'm born in Austria.
I see.
Now living in Zurich.
Okay.
He's one of the ETH students.
Ah, okay.
In Arno's chair.
We live in Zurich, actually.
Yeah, you do?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
And in Berlin, right? A little bit.
I have a studio here in Berlin, yes. But officially, I live in Zurich with my wife. Yeah.
I know we don't really do this on TV, but can we quickly say thank you to the technical team?
Yes.
And to the KW team?
Yes.
Yes.
Who have all done incredible work, especially that guy who's been non-stop.
Yes,
with the headphones. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Whoever wants to wait for the other, the tofu is fantastic. But also, we're done, right?
Well, the next part.
Next part is over there, and we're going to have a book presentation by the Schengen book, which you heard like 20 times today. And yeah.
Nice.
And have a drink.
And have a drink. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Christoph. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm still trying to imagine what we do with this.
Yes, you can't do much.
Can you what? You want to taste it?
No, it's yeah, I would not.